Ruth Dyson.
Mr Speaker, I'm delighted to join the voices of support for the second reading of the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill, and I want to particularly congratulate the Local Government and Environment Select Committee on the work that they did. I think very ably chaired by a member whose name just escapes me at the moment. Scott Simpson, excellent chair
I'm Trevor Mallard. You better not put me into the debate.
I think the whole committee seems to have done a very good job on this. The bill was certainly necessary. It's not a very big bill. It's not a very substantial bill. It hasn't got a lot of policy issues in it, but it was needed to update the powers that DOC officers have. So the main new powers that are given in this bill are the power to seize a wider range of evidence. That's clearly to ensure that any prosecution has a more robust case behind it so that it doesn't fail. That's a smart thing to do. The power to stop a person. This might seem like that must be the case at the moment, but actually under the current Wildlife Powers Act, rangers only have powers to stop vehicles, vessels and other items, such as if somebody's carrying a bag. They can detain the bag, but they can't detain the person. So that obviously makes examination, calling the police, etc., a lot more difficult. Currently, rangers can't temporarily stop people to assist in an investigation. So obviously, if somebody's doing something that is considered illegal, they can just leave, and again, the rangers have no ability to stop them. Or if the rangers think that person might have been a witness to such offence, they can't stop them either. They can't seize evidence, they can't seize cameras, they can't seize mobile phones, they can't seize laptops. I think the original legislation was probably before laptops and mobile phones were in use. This is 1953 legislation, so it's getting on there. We didn't have mobile phones and laptops, so I'm told, in those days. Another new power that is being given by this legislation is the power to require suspected offenders to supply identification details. So obviously that's another critical bit of information that would enable a successful prosecution to later go through. And in some specific examples, there are warranted rangers and approved officers who would actually themselves have the power of arrest. So those are the main additional powers that are being given to all DOC rangers and some specifically warranted rangers and approved officers in terms of the power of arrest. Labor supports any measure which will help our hard-working conservation staff do their jobs properly. I don't think there'd be very many New Zealanders who don't totally value the work that DOC do. It will be a good message for them to hear from this Parliament that their work is so appreciated, because we know that they don't feel very valued, they don't feel as if they're properly supported to get on and do their job. In fact, in August last year, the Department of Conservation do an annual survey, and the 2015 results showed that only 27% of DOC staff had faith and confidence in their senior leadership, which is a really sad reflection on how people that we in this Parliament value so much look to regard the support that they are given. We know that our natural environment isn't just good for New Zealanders to love and value, but it's also a massive asset for our countries for recreation as well as tourism. People come to New Zealand because of the beautiful environment that we have, of course, because of the welcoming people as well. So we have to ensure that that environment is protected for future generations. We have a responsibility as parliamentarians to ensure that that protection is properly funded and properly supported. We know that DOC have been struggling with funding over the last little while. I know under the previous minister there were substantial cuts to the DOC budget. The minister came to a select committee that I was on and explained the reason for the cuts, basically said, we haven't got enough money to go around, and DOC has to have its share of the cuts in the same way as other government departments and agencies have done. That was his explanation. It wasn't well received, I know, by the committee at the time, because DOC is only funded to the bare minimum now, and they can't really afford to face any more cuts. We know that DOC staff, as I mentioned earlier, feel undervalued. They also are underworked. Last year, 1,500 DOC staff took industrial action. They were offered a pitiful pay increase. They felt as if it was a slap in the face, given all the work that they had done. And so in this legislation, we're giving them additional work. And what would be really great to hear, and I'm sure that DOC staff would welcome it, is are they getting additional resources? They're getting all these additional powers. That will mean more work that they're doing under the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill when it's passed. But where are the resources to back it up? In 2009, there were 803 DOC rangers. That's public information. It can't be argued because it's information that's on the public record. There are now only 637. Again, information that is on the public record. There have been no change in the names of the rangers. There can be no explanation such as they're now called something else. They were rangers then, they're rangers now, and the number has reduced substantially. And again, in this bill, we're giving those very people more work to do. It's the DOC rangers that are going to be asked to do this work. In 2009, the DOC budget was cut by $46 million. That's the previous minister, and I've just already explained the reasons that he gave to the Select Committee for that cut. And in 2013, it was cut by another $8.7 million. I want to know, for the next budget, will this additional work that we're giving the rangers under the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill be properly resourced? We should not be setting up public servants to fail. That is a very bad thing for this government to do. It's a bad thing for this parliament to do. So while we support the intent of this legislation, and we'll certainly be voting for it, I suppose the message to the minister is put your money where your mouth is. Let's see the resources so that we can be confident that this legislation will be enacted in the way that Parliament has intended, in the way the Select Committee discussed in their careful deliberations, and in the way I'm sure the Minister originally intended. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.